And I hope that the video actually gave you good insight, on the life of a GovTechie. To discover more about us, we do have our colleagues from the talent attraction team, Jia Ying and Hui Jia, right behind. So feel free to connect with them after the session to find out a little bit more about us. So I'm Dinah, and the community engagement lead in GovTech. Together with my team, we run the StackX DevRel community. So for those who are new, welcome to that big family. So in today's meetup, we have the team from GovWallet with us. GovWallet is actually one of GovTech latest digital tool developed by our government digital services team. It was initially developed as an internal pilot project at GovTech, which enables GovTechies to credit staff benefits into GovWallet and transfer them to their Pay Now accounts or use them at merchants that accepts Pay Now at e-payment. So now it has become an alternative means to distribute government payouts to beneficiaries. So before we start, we would like to also share that photos and videos will be taken today for marketing purposes. This session will also be recorded. The BOD will be made available after the session, so do keep a lookout on our StackX Telegram chat. And at the end of the speaker sharing, we will be conducting a Q&A session. So we ask that your questions to be kept at the topics today to keep the session meaningful. For online participants, feel free to type your questions and comments via the Zoom Q&A panel throughout the sessions. Okay, so Ima, Dawson and Jia Jie from GDS will be sharing the development journey of GovWallet and discuss the tech behind this. So this is actually the program highlights for today. So before that, here are just some quick facts about GovTech. So GovTech today, we are more than 3,000 strong. We developed new and meaningful digital products for citizens and businesses to elevate our effort for tech for public good. We also support public agencies in terms of their long-term tech capabilities. Our work can also be broadly classified into three main areas: products, services, cyber, and governance. Okay, so just to the previous slide. Yeah. Yes, so under products, right, we have more than 700 developers implement products for the whole of government and develop strategic national projects. We also have capability centers in digital services, sensors and IoT, data science and AI, cybersecurities and infrastructures. The product team also manages the whole of government infrastructures from our move to commercial clouds to data centers to issuance, of the data. So under services, it's also the biggest among the three, making up more than half of GovTech staff. They play an important role in managing technologies in over 60% of government agencies in Singapore. Under cyber and governance, which is the sector lead for cybersecurity in the government, our CISO, Chief Information Security Officers, actually sits in GovTech. So to ensure that the work that we do is safe and secure, our governance group sets the ICT policies and guidelines across whole of government. And to engage tech folks like yourself, GovTech formed the StackX community in 2019. We hope that StackX is also a place for learning and sharing across the public sectors and industry. Aim is also to collectively build a smart nation on the government tech stacks. And some of the updates of the latest StackX meetup will also be shared with our community via the StackX meetup and Telegram group. So these are great ways to actually stay informed. So join us by scanning the QR code on the screen. We will be sharing the links in the Zoom chat box for our virtual audience too. And in case you haven't heard, this is the Singapore Government Developer Portal, or in short, Dev Portal. It's a one-stop resource hub for government digital products and services, featuring over 120 content pieces targeted at various aspects of digital transformations. You can find a range of content covering best practices and guideline, whole of government products, technical documentations, and tech community resources. So recent additions to the Singapore government developer portals include write-ups on the ICT and SS management guidelines, also previously known as IM8, government on commercial cloud and cloud file transfer. So we strongly encourage you to hop onto the site and find out more. Scan the QR code for more information. So we also have published, more information of today's sessions, GovWallet on developers portal. So, the link will also be shared in the Zoom chat for our virtual audience. So to kickstart this session today, we do have Stephen Cole, Director of the Government Digital Services. Yeah, Stephen.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, everybody. Good to see all of you here. I was here last week as well. Hi, Billy. So today's topic is of GovWallet. It's kind of related to last week's topic on OSG business grants and all. It's all about giving money, dispersing money to citizens. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to the team behind GovWallet. So may I have the GovWallet team please stand up and take a look at the audience, if I don't mind. Yeah. Okay. So these are our awesome team behind GovWallet. And if any of you are interested to join us, you may come and look for them as well. Yeah, our team is always hiring. Yeah, the thing you talk about the background of GovWallet. We started about 1.5 years ago as part of staff appreciation token, where we tried out this idea of using GovWallet to disperse out credits to GovTechies in appreciation of them during the COVID period. And fast forward to now, we have onboarded at least 4 schemes onto GovWallet. And we have worked with numerous partners, government agencies, for example, STB and CPF, MHA, MINDEF, HPB, and so on and so forth. And this is actually built leveraging on whatever we have, like the existing government app like LiveSG, Health 365 app, as well as Sgqr, or specifically PayNow and Nets that's been deployed out. You're very familiar when you go to pay for your sugarcane, for your char kway teow, those QR code out there, together with the banks and the Nets. It's our mantra that as much as possible, we do not want to reinvent the wheel, and we leverage on whatever is out there. Yeah. Without further ado, I would like to pass the stage to Diana. From here, over.
So thank you, Stephen. And now to the part that everybody has been waiting for. Let's welcome our very first speaker from GovTech GDS to start tonight's sharing on the GovWallet. Ima, please.
Thanks, Diana. So hi, I'm Emanuela, or Ima for short. So I'll be talking about GovWallet to kind of walk through with you. But as a first start, can all of you hear me okay? Okay, that's good. So this is GovWallet. It's basically a digital wallet for you to receive money and for you to spend the money that you get from your government. A very quick TLDR. So the overview today will actually be 3 big parts. I will first kind of give a short intro of GovWallet, and I might repeat a bit, but it's okay. And then we'll kind of walk through some of the user flows that we went through, what we thought of, what have we launched. We'll also go into the technical deep dives next, whereby we try to give you a glimpse of what we implement, why we do what we do, what are the lessons we learn. And afterwards, we'll go on to Q&A. So at any one point, if you have any questions, do feel free to note it down in case you might forget about it later on. Okay, so let's start. So as mentioned by Stephen just now, we started off as a trial within GovTech in October 2020, and we felt that this could be something useful. And we spent 1 year planning, designing, implementing, and we launched in November 21. So we launched two things in November. One is actually the GovCash scheme, whereby we allow citizens to withdraw money from the OCBC ATMs. We've also allowed payment, PayNow payment via the Live SG app, previously called Moments of Life. Fast forward to this year, April, we actually allowed Nets payment via the Live SG app. And we also allow Nets payment via the H365 app that is maintained by Health Promotion Board, HPB. We've also worked with SingPass Mobile. So if you actually have SingPass Mobile, you can actually go in. There should be a GovWallet card that you can see info about your schemes. So all of these are work in progress, and there's definitely more in the pipeline to come. And as mentioned as well, we've currently worked with 4 agencies thus far: CPFB, MINDEF, MHA, and Health Promotion Board, HPB. So when we talk about GovWallet and money, so let's talk about the current landscape, right? So there's 2 ways of receiving payouts at the moment. On the left, you can see it's actually cash. So how you can get cash is there are 2 ways, right? One is you get the money directly credited to your bank account. The other way is we'll actually mail checks out to you. And then for the other one is actually instead of cash, maybe you'll get vouchers. These vouchers have mostly been physical, but have turned digital in the recent years. And with vouchers, you either have fixed denominations of maybe $2, $5, and $10, for example, or you actually have flexible spending, whereby you just get a form of credits and then you can spend however you like. So this will form the basis of the entire walkthrough, where we talk about, we kind of delve deep into the voucher and the cash section to kind of show you what we have tried to improve and bring value to the citizens. So for vouchers, so we kind of zoomed in on digital vouchers and flexible spending. And the big question that we have is there a way to make credit spending more flexible for the citizens? So when you think about spending, there are usually 3 parties involved, right? You have the citizens who have the money to spend. You also have the agencies that are actually dispersing the money to citizens. And you also have the shops that are accepting money, right? So what we want to do is we want to kind of follow the user flows of these 3 parties, and we want to see what challenges does each of them face in terms of voucher payouts. So we're going to start off with the citizen. So let's talk about Sue, right? Sue is a home baker as well as a mother. And naturally, you know that trying to balance your family and your work is something that is very hard to do. And she relies a lot on her apps and stuff to keep her day on track and to make sure that she remembers what she needs to do. Yeah. And Sue was given some government vouchers last year to help with her household expenses. And the problem is that because it is a physical voucher, she actually has to book a date on her calendar to go down and collect. And she has to remember to bring it out to spend. And if she forgets, then the vouchers are expired and you can no longer use them anymore, which in essence is wasted money. Yeah. So let's plot out Sue's journey, right? So she will receive a letter informing her of a new payout. She'll have to book a date to collect the physical vouchers. And then when she goes out to spend, she needs to bring the vouchers out. She needs to track which shops accept these vouchers. Yeah, and then she needs to spend the vouchers. So quite a lot of steps and not very friendly. Let's move on to the agency side. So Gabriel is a government official that have helped with this voucher distribution for 10 years. So every year he has to think about which vouchers he wants to procure the vouchers, which merchants would be interested to sign up, onboard the merchants. He have to think about how to distribute the vouchers to the citizens to make sure that it's easy for citizens to collect. And once all the vouchers are kicked in and the launch starts, right, he needs to think about reimbursement. How do I collect the vouchers from the merchants and how do I faster reimburse them the money so that their cash flow and everything is fine? So there's a lot of things to do in a single year, and imagine doing it every year for 10 years. So this is his journey. So you will first have to procure the vouchers, after which you need to think about how to distribute it. Then you need to think about who are eligible citizens, and then you need to onboard the merchants. And then once the campaign is live, you need to think about how to collect, how to reimburse. So there's a lot of steps. So you move on to the merchants. So let's talk about Auntie Annie. So Auntie Annie owns a drink store and she's very tech savvy. But the thing is, there's a lot of payment methods in the recent years. So she tries to learn everything, but then there's a lot to learn and it seems like there's always something new. And it can get a bit confusing for Auntie when she tries to navigate the different payment methods. And she will also need to take time to exchange vouchers for cash, or she need to learn a new tool to actually accept voucher payments. So this is Auntie Annie's journey. She'll have to understand that, oh, there's a new way of government payouts, that she needs to figure out how to accept it, how to store it, how to pass it all back to the agency to get her money back. So summarizing, right? These are all the challenges that we've mapped out for Sue, Gabriel, and Auntie Annie. So I think for Sue, it's kind of easier to solve compared to Gabriel and Auntie Annie. And the first thing we looked at was actually merchants, right? So as Stephen mentioned, we do not like to reinvent the wheel. And it felt like this process can be simplified. So we started asking ourselves, is there a way to leverage the payment ecosystem in Singapore? And are the payment ecosystems in Singapore ready to kind of like, do they have this big network of merchants that we can easily tap on? So, so our question is it possible to leverage? And what we found was that as at September 2021, there's actually 164,000 merchants registered with PayNow, right? Some of these merchants include Shopee, Lazada, Giving SG, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. In terms of nets, there is 120,000 nets acceptance points. So if you look at this data, it gives us the confidence to be able to work with the merchants and the industry to actually easily, seamlessly integrate, such that we allow citizens to spend at all these number of acceptance points easily. Right. So other than leveraging on the current payment ecosystems, we also talk about maybe we can do a direct disbursement of credits. And if we can do a direct disbursement of credits, we have the ability to give reminders to remind citizens that you have unspent credits. We also will have the ability to let you see what you have spent on previously. And by leveraging on the current payment ecosystems, we may be able to give faster reimbursement to merchants because you kind of simplify a lot of the work on the agency side. And we will also want to allow a selection of specific merchants because we understand that payouts may have a specific sector that they want to target, and we want to give them this ability to do so. So after all the improvements that I listed, how would the improvements look like for Sue, Gabriel, and Auntie Annie? So this is where we talk about Gov credits, which is what we launched, whereby we want to allow you to easily spend your payouts like any other e-wallet apps in the market. So with the direct disbursement, Gabriel can basically first find the list of eligible citizens and instruct GovWallet to give the payout. Once the payouts are activated, Sue can easily receive the payouts and start using it as soon as she sees the balance topped up in her account. So as a note, right, all these diagrams are actually purely for illustration purposes. Yeah. And then because Sue can actually see all the payouts, right, there's actually no longer any need for her to go and collect the vouchers or remember to bring it out because nowadays you always bring out your phone. And let's say closer or like halfway along the scheme, Gabriel can easily find a list of citizens who have unspent credits and helps to send a reminder to say, hey, you still have money left. Please remember to spend them. And upon receiving the reminder, Sue will actually can go and spend the money to make sure that everything is fully utilized. She can also look through her transaction history to see where she has spent it thus far. And in terms of merchant onboarding, I believe with the current landscape, right, most shops actually already accept PayNow on nets. So there is little to zero merchant onboarding needed. For shops that need some onboarding, we can actually ask them to onboard onto PayNow and nets. And this onboarding can be done once and also allow them to receive e-payments from any other wallets as well. And for Sue, because there's no need to actually go to a website or wherever to kind of see where these payouts are accepted. You can just go into the mall, find a shop that actually accepts PayNow or nets, that you can spend it very easily. And because you can spend it so easily, right, we can, by tapping on the payment ecosystems and the payment rails that the industry have at the moment, you can actually transfer cash at real time to the merchants. There is no need for the merchants to actually compile everything and pass it to the agency and wait for the reimbursement. So everything is done in real time for every successful scan and pay. And depending on the time period and the payment rails used, the money received can be either instant or the next day. And we also understand that, let's say for government payouts, let's say Gabriel's agency decides that they want to target a specific sector. By using GovWallet's ring fencing feature, they can actually do that. So they can decide which sector they would like to focus on. And by working with us, we can actually direct the funds and the payouts to that particular sector itself. So rounding up, right? This is actually Sue's new journey. Previously, you had to remember to collect and spend. Now you just need to receive the letter and get a reminder should you have unspent credits left. For Gabriel's new journey, it's actually now a lot simpler. So all he have to do is to just define the eligible citizens list, as well as to look at the sector that he wants to focus on. For Auntie Annie, it's actually also a lot simpler. You may have to learn about the new payouts, but there's no need for you to remember a whole new process to actually collect and redeem. You can basically accept it like any other payment that you accept it at the moment. And now I'll kind of show you the video demo of the scan and pay for nets. So as you can see the available credits. And you can just like maybe you bought 100 plus and then you decided to pay via the Live SG app. So it's actually quite simple. It's very similar to most of the other e-payment apps that you have nowadays. Yeah, and the transaction is done. You can actually show this screen to the store to say, yes, I've paid. Yeah, we'll also move on to kind of show a video demo of Pay Now. They're essentially the same thing. It's just that we tap on different payment rails. Yeah, so for example, this is a celebratory gifts for NS Men. And then you can just scan the UEN at the store and you can transfer the money straight away. Yeah, so it's really very simple. Yeah. So now we're done with the demo and we'll move on to the other side, right? We covered vouchers, let's talk about cash. So I think the part about getting the money directly in your bank account is perfectly okay so far. So let's talk about the check portion, right? Is there a better way to give out this money other than mailing out checks? So we go back to the same thing again. What are some challenges we face with check payouts, right? So the first challenge is that it's actually very costly. When you think about mailing out checks, you have to procure the checkbooks. You have to write out and print and write all the checks, and then you have to issue it out and mail it out. And should the citizen forget to cash in their checks after 6 months, the check is now expired and the citizen has to go and appeal to the agency again. And this whole process is repeated. So this is a very high cost action to have to do. The second one is actually barriers that these citizens may face. So there are some difficulties that some citizens may face. They may not be comfortable with sharing bank account details. They may not be able to maintain the minimum average balance of 500 a month, or else they'll have to pay the fall below fee. Or they may be classified as high-risk individuals by the banks and they simply cannot open a bank account. So if you don't have a bank account, you cannot receive the payout easily. And this is an article from 2018, whereby Minister Ong talked about how we want to be a check-free nation by 2025. We are pretty close to that date, but there is no solution out there to provide an alternative for the unbanked. And we need to cater for that, and we need to think of a different approach. So then this brings us to the question of how can we actually help agencies to continue dispersing these payouts to the unbanked through a different approach. This led to a GovCash product launch. GovCash inside GovWallet is a collaboration between CPFB, OCBC, and multiple teams in GovTech, whereby we allow users to withdraw cash from ATMs without an ATM card. Do note that this is currently only available to OCBC ATMs. Right, so let's kind of go through the user journey again, right? So we have Ama Alice. So Ama Alice is very savvy. She uses WhatsApp to catch up with her friends and family. And she has reasons for not having a bank account, but let's not go there. And whenever she receives a check payout from the government, she will bring it to the bank to cash it out. And if she needs help, she will just seek help from the youngsters near her. Right. We also have Bob. So Bob is a caregiver to his mom. His mom is, due to health reasons, his mom requires care, 24/7 care, and she stays in a nursing home. And Bob is actually the authorized third party. So whenever like his mom receives these checks, Bob will actually bring it to the bank to actually cash it out to help with the expenses. So this is the 3 ways that we have thought of to withdraw cash after a very long discussion among all the parties. We also want to highlight that it's been a very interesting endeavor because there are cases whereby we feel that you can just use technology to solve things, but sometimes technology alone is not the best solution. And you need to think about how you would make use of technology in the best way in order to create an experience that is seamless. So this experience may feel a bit rough by the edges, but this is what we tried out and we will see how we can do better. So there are 3 ways. For users that can self-help, they can actually just go to any OCBC ATM and withdraw the cash on their own. Sometimes the users may require a bit of assistance. That is for the second flow, whereby they can actually ask for help. And the last one is actually we cater for cases like Bob, who have to help his mom withdraw cash, so that at least like they don't have to feel that it's a hassle to actually cash out the check. So this is now Alice's journey when she is able to handle it on her own and there are no technical issues. Right, so she will visit the OCBC ATM. She'll authenticate herself by providing her NRIC as well as an 8-digit value as a 2FA. She will also tap on NDI's SingPass face verification service to make sure that it is really Auntie Alice. And afterwards, you can select the scheme that you want to withdraw from, and then you can get the cash from the ATM. In the event that, let's say, there is some technical assistance, like maybe the light isn't that bright and then the face verification fails, she can actually call for OCBC digital ambassadors. These are people that OCBC have trained to help these beneficiaries out with getting their payouts. And they will actually help the citizen through to make sure that the citizen can get their money from the ATM. And in the case for Bob, Bob will also have to check with the OCBC digital ambassadors so that they can verify to say that you are an authorized third person party for the beneficiary to allow you to withdraw from the scheme. So these are checks that we tap on the bank side. And now I'll kind of show you how the ATM flow works. So there is this government payout site whereby you will click through. And then this is where you enter your 2FA PIN. And afterwards, you follow up by keying your NRIC. Note that this NRIC is a fake NRIC. And then this will be the rainbow part whereby you would kind of do your face verification. Yeah, and afterwards here, you actually see the schemes that you are eligible for so that you can pick your specific scheme. For each scheme, there's actually the balance below so that you don't have to click through so many screens. You can see everything in one glance. Yeah, so you kind of pick the amount to withdraw and we will process it. And if everything goes well, the GovWallet system will actually mark down the funds and then the citizen can actually now get their money. Yeah, so this is actually what we came up with as an alternative to check issuance. So I'll now move on. So I've come to the end of like sharing like roughly what we have done so far as a team, as well as what were the user flows we walked through, where we tried to solve, where we tried to bring value. We'll now move on to the technical deep dives. So in essence, right, GovWallet can be described in 2 words, right? Disbursements, whereby citizens get money, and distribution of this money after citizens get their money to the merchants. So this is actually how we structure our technical deep dives. So I'll start off with the tech stack overview. So for GovWallet, we mainly write on Serverless, API Gateway, Lambda, and DynamoDB for our backend. This is a subset of the services that we use. For config and infra management, we make use of Terraform. Our backend is written in TypeScript and Python, and we practice GitOps. And now I hand the time over to Delson, who will be sharing more about the disbursement portion.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Delson, software engineer in GovWallet. I'll start by talking about a technical deep dive into the disbursement of payouts. So I'll share a little bit about some of the pain points that we have discovered, as well as how we arrived to our solution. So as Ima mentioned earlier, we have been working with a couple of agencies, and most of the funds actually originate from them. So our job here is to help to disperse the funds to citizens who are eligible. So I'll highlight 2 types of disbursement methods. One is actually the immediate disbursement. What that actually means is that when I start to perform a disbursement right now, by right, the citizen should almost immediately get the funds in the account. But this is not really a common method chosen, mostly because our schemes actually have a future date in terms of the disbursement. And there's a little bit of additional complexity as well when you're performing disbursements in a just-in-time moment. The second disbursement method is actually the scheduled disbursement method, which is the common method when we are integrating with all these different government agencies. So what that actually means is that when we perform a disbursement, we are performing it right now, but we are scheduling it at a further time in the future. And our system will perform the processing afterwards. So how does our scheduled disbursement work for GovWallet? I will illustrate the whole system with a very simple example. Okay, let's assume that now we are issuing payouts to 2 citizens, Tom and Mary, and each of them will get $100. Assuming they already have some money in their balance, 100 and 150 respectively, assuming today is 4th of February, we perform a disbursement of credits 100 each, but they'll only be in effect 4th June, that's 4 months later. So in between February to June, right, the credits are not in effect yet. So that means that their balance remains the same. And assuming they haven't spent on anything yet, the balance will remain 100 and 150. Fast forward to 4th June, that's when the credits are now in effect and the balance will then be incremented. And onwards, they can start to spend the credits. So it sounds pretty simple, the flow. But there are some challenges that we faced when we are working on scheduled disbursements. So I'll share a little bit about some of the pain points that we faced. The first one is actually already in the name, part of the scheduled part, which means we do have to schedule this in a future date. And that introduces quite a bit of complexity because you are doing something now and in the future it will happen. Yeah, so it's quite complex. Secondly, as illustrated in the example, we are dispersing to 2 citizens, but normally we disperse to more than 2. We actually disperse to quite a large volume of citizens, that's in tens of thousands. So that's something that we have to consider as well, how scalable our solution is. And lastly, it's an instantaneous effect for the disbursement. That means when we say 4th June, it needs to come in 4th June. Yeah, it cannot come in 5th June. So I'll share about some of the lessons that we learned while we worked on processing and scaling scheduled disbursements in our system. I think one of the main things is actually about the efficiency in calculating the balance for these customers. So for us, we want to ensure that the balance is reflected correctly, and actually it's pretty tricky. Yeah, especially when the disbursements are in a future date. So for us, it's really about finding the best way to update the balance, scalable and is quick and is correct. So for the team, we actually arrived on 2 possible options. The first one is actually an in-depth live calculation. So how that actually works is that we start by having all the valid disbursements, we get all of them. And then we get all the past transactions that this customer has. And then finally, we'll just sum them all up to get an accurate balance. So giving an example again, assuming that the computation is now on 4th June. So today is 4th June. This person has a total of 4 different records over here. Disbursement on the 1st of June, 1st of Jan, valid on 1st of Jan, sorry. Valid on the 1st of February. He made a transaction on the 2nd of February, and there's a future disbursement on the 1st of August. So just looking at these 4 rows, 4 records, very simple. The balance is $50. So it's a very intuitive solution. I think everyone can really understand. It's easy to implement in some sense. However, we realized that, because this is going to be there's going to be a lot of transactions, a lot of disbursements, a lot of citizens. It means that it might not scale that well if, let's say, we want to, there's a lot of transactions coming in, and each time you check the balance, you have to calculate again, check the balance, calculate again. So it's not going to be a very scalable solution, which is why we actually went with option number 2, which is the ad hoc updates of the balance. So how that actually works is that the user balance is actually computed and stored somewhere for easy retrieval. And upon any new active disbursements or transactions that come in, we will just update the user balance again. So in this case, it really scales a lot better for large amounts of transactions and disbursements that are coming in, which is what we would expect. However, there is a need to handle some concurrency edge cases, which I will share more later. Yeah. So secondly, we will need to scale for large amounts of disbursement that come in. So as I mentioned just now, normally it's not 2 citizens that we are serving. We are serving tens of thousands or more. Yeah. So I'll share another example to illustrate how we actually solve this problem. Let's say we scale it up to 50,000 times to 100,000 citizens, and we want their payout to be valid at a specific time. So, okay, like I mentioned, the goal is 100,000 citizens payout processed at midnight. So how do we scale this? So what we actually did is we split all these 100,000 disbursements into buckets. Okay, it's not a physical buckets, it's a theoretical buckets, right? So it's just for illustration. So in this case, we try to split them equally among all the buckets. So out of these 10 buckets, each bucket will have about 10,000 disbursements. Yeah. Afterwards, we have a periodic way of actually checking each bucket. So every minute we check, and then we will process the records, the disbursements, only when they are valid. Which means, let's say today is 4th June, or it's time for the records to be processed. We will start to process all of them, and we actually process them concurrently in a batch method, so that each record is processed at the same time, and that saves a lot of time for us. And theoretically for us, our system will be able to handle 100,000 records less than 5 minutes. So it's almost instantaneous. And for us, how we can actually scale this long term, in the event there's large volume, there's a lot of people getting money, right? We'll just increase the number of buckets. And that is just a 1-line change on our code base. Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, this possibility of some edge cases where there's some errors and stuff like that. So mistakes do happen. So for us, it's how we want to handle them when it happens. Yeah. For us, we do have pretty strong validation at the start of the scheduled disbursements when we start to create them. So for that example, on the 4th of February, we already had some safeguards to ensure nothing like this will happen. But if they do happen, we have a very short retry period of 1 minute. So it's immediately, once it fails, we will retry again just to make sure that it works. Yeah. And one of the edge cases like that I mentioned just now is on concurrency. So what that actually means is that, okay, we're back to the buckets. So for example, for Tom, he has disbursements. Somehow he has 2 disbursements on the same date, 2 separate disbursements. So one in bucket A and one in bucket B, separate buckets. For us, as I mentioned earlier, we are incrementing the balance upon getting this scheduled disbursement. But because there's 2 that's happening at the same time, we cannot increment the balance at the same time. That means that the first record in bucket A will just increase the money, and the second one will fail, and then we have to retry it immediately afterwards. Yeah, so some form of race condition over here that we have to handle. Yeah. So there are some of the other technical approaches that we did consider. I think we considered the use of DynamoDB's time to live feature. So the benefits is that we are not reinventing the wheel; it's already part of the database feature. But then there are some concerns as well, because there are some quirks that the time to leave can only take up to like 24 hours to remove, not instantaneous, which is one of the concerns that we had. So we did consider pushing all of these records into a queue. So they will just queue. And some of the benefits include it being a sync method. So same as previously, it will be the batch process, it will be processed all together at the same time. And we can also make use of a DL queue, also known as the date letter queue. And if there's any failures, you'll go into a separate queue where we can process it again. But some of the concerns that we did face is that there is a limit to the number of messages in the queue. So we don't want to be limited by that. And at the same time, there are a couple more functions that we will need to create to process the events in the queue and things like that. And ultimately, additional infrastructure might not be really required in this case. We don't want to over-engineer this. So which is why we went with the buckets. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll pass my time back to Ima, who will share about the expiration of these payouts. Thank you.
Hi, so it's me again. So thanks, Delson. So just now I mentioned that like GovWallet is essentially disbursement and distribution. We're now still in the disbursements part whereby we talk about expiration of payouts. So why expiration, right? We would all want our payouts to be evergreen. Like there's no need to expire, no need to remember to use them. But actually expiration caters for financial reconciliation as well as the year-end closing of financial accounts. And this may differ across government schemes. And because it differs, so naturally, different government payouts will actually have different expiration dates. And some of them really do not expire at all. And we, in the process of thinking about expiration, we also tried to come up with a few assumptions, know the boundaries, and we felt that it is actually very possible for a single citizen to receive payouts from the same scheme twice, and it wouldn't be fair to assume that both of them will expire on the same date, and they should actually expire on different dates. So how does credits expiry work on GovWallet? These are the two big assumptions that we've made at the start. So we wanted to define what is the time at which you expire, because that's actually the most important part. So we assume that the smallest factor of time is actually a day, and the only hour that you can expire in that day is at 235959. So it means that if, let's say I'm saying that I pay out $100 to Delson and it expires on 19th of May, it's not going to expire at 19 May 7 p.m. or 4 p.m. It's just going to expire at 11:59 p.m. So this will actually make it very easy for us to scope down the problem. And on the right, as you can see, this is actually how we choose to model it. We'll note down to say that the payouts will actually expire on 3rd of June 2022. Initial balance is actually the total amount of disbursements you got for this date that expires on this date. Available balance is naturally what you have left with. So this is also an example just to show you how we model for citizens that receive multiple payouts that expire on different days. So as you can see, the total balance here is actually $590. And on the left, you would see that the payouts actually expire on 3rd of June 2022 with $90 to spare. As well, on the right, you'll see that it's actually it will expire on 31st of March 2023, and the available balance is 500. So this adds up to a total balance of 590 for Tom. And let's say you look past Tom. Let's bring in like 3 citizens worth, right? Tom, Mary, and Auntie Lucy. So this is to show a simple scenario of credits expiry, right? You can see that Tom and Mary have payouts that are valid from 2022 to August 2023, and Tom can actually receive another payout sometime in 2023. So there is an end date to it. But you can also see for Auntie Lucy, whereby when she has the payout of $100, right, it does not expire. So naturally, this would be easy to kind of look at this and see like, oh, actually, there are many ways to make this a lot more complex. You could have overlapping payouts. You could have like very close cutting expiry dates. So hopefully this gives you a glimpse. And then the next assumption we made was actually how would we update this expiration payout bucket, right, per se. So what we decided was that we will always update the earliest expiring bucket, both in the form of deductions when you spend money and refunds when, let's say, something goes wrong and we actually give you back your money. So let's do some math. So let's say, right, let's talk about Tom again, right? So as you can see, Tom have two buckets, one that expire on 3rd June this year, one that expires 31st March next year. Tom now spends $20 on lunch. So following the assumption of deducting from the earlier spending bucket, you would see that we actually simply update the 3rd June bucket and the available balance is now $70. We have left the second bucket untouched. So this is a very simple case. Let's say we talk about a more complex case whereby you are spending beyond that $70. Now, how would that look like? So let's say Tom, on the same day, Tom goes out for a date night and he spends $120, right? This is now beyond the $70 for the first bucket. So you would now see on the right at the top that the available balance for this 3rd June bucket is now at $0. And the second bucket is now deducted to just be left with $450. So this is just a way to kind of illustrate how it works on our side. So we kind of covered deduction. Let's talk about refunds. So let's say refunds. Maybe Tom buys a $60 game, but there was a payment error. So Tom will need his $60 back, right? If not, he'll be cheated of this $60. So how it works is, again, remember that we will always use the earliest expiring bucket, and therefore you would see that $60 goes to the bucket that expires on 3rd June instead of the bucket below. But total balance still remains the same. So I hope I gave a glimpse of like how expiration works and some of the headaches and challenges that we thought of. So now I'll cover the lessons learned. So the first lesson we learned is we could have planned ahead better while we deliver milestones. We did not do a very good job of doing that. And that meant that when we had to implement new enhancements and features, things got a bit complex. So this is something that we've learned. So we will do that better. And also by planning ahead, we can actually define our milestones better to make sure that we save us some work down the line. We also learned that it's actually good to make assumptions because credit expiration is actually a very complex thing to handle. And when you make assumptions, you set the bounds and you and it helps guide our understanding of how this feature will work. What are the limits to this feature? What can we possibly expand next time round? So it's good to make assumptions so that you can scope down the problem and you can think of how to solve it. And there's also a need to balance user needs as well as minimum data records stored. So as a team, we felt that we wanted to minimize the data records that we keep. So let's say if the payouts expire, right, we would kind of offload it from the DB, but you can still query it through your transaction history. And we felt that that was okay because our goal was to make sure that for partners that call our API, it has to be fast because all of us don't like waiting for stuff. But it turns out that it was a very wrong assumption because agencies and end users actually wanted to see the payouts that have expired. And when we realized that, we had to kind of work with them, and they are now going through a more complex flow to retrieve these values while we work on enhancements to make sure that we simplify things on their end. So this has been a pretty interesting lesson. Yeah. So now we'll kind of move on to the distribution part whereby Jiajie or JJ will be talking about the Sgqr payment parser.
Hi, I'm JJ. Yeah, so I'll be talking about something different. So you all have been hearing about how you're getting the money, how you're going to spend it, how they're going to take it away from you through expiry, right? I'm going to talk about how you're going to spend it. So I'm pretty sure most of you have been exposed to something like that. So it's something that we all are very familiar with now, but it wasn't before. So it's basically the Sgqr, right? Something very ubiquitous now. So what it is actually it's basically just a barcode, right? Then it converts to a string, and then all the applications do something with it, and then you get your bubble tea, right? Very simple. So why Sgqr, right? Why did the government come with something like this? So actually, there are two main issues. So you're going to make electronic payments like very easy. So I'm sure some of you remember at one point where you all had to go to the shop and then you had to ask the person, I'm using this app, what QR do I scan? Right. So now you just have to scan a single QR. Very easy. And I think also from the point of view from the merchant, actually they also had a lot of difficulties. So some of them had a PayNow terminal, some of them had a Nets terminal, and then they also had to scramble and ask you what payment method are you using. So you don't have to do that now. So I'm sure a lot of you are curious what's inside, right? What's the magic going on behind it? Actually, there's not much. So there's two broad categories. The first broad category is actually you want to make payment, so you need an address, right? You need to know how to make the payment. So I'm sure a lot of you have used PayNow to pay like maybe to get bubble tea or to pay your friends. So the first bit of information is always something, the address that you can go towards. So for example, pay to a company is to a UEN, to your friend is a mobile number. And then each Sgqr can contain multiple instances of the payment scheme information. So later I'll show you all some examples of that. And then I think a lot of you are familiar as well. So maybe some of you use FaithPay or whatever to get rewards. So actually you can choose whatever you want, however you want to pay. It's very easy. So the next broad category is basically metadata. How, like for example, some things are transaction amount, currency, merchant name, and so on. So these are information that helps the bank to reconcile the transactions as well. So now that you know what's inside, how do we get from the QR to payment, right? So we're going to start with the end goal here. So we want to pass, validate, and transform them to obtain their contents and serve it to customers. So in this case, the consumers are people who are shopping, right? And also people who consume our API. So maybe agencies or other systems as well. So what's that pass? How do we get from that QR to what payment, right? So the passing is basically to resolve the QR into parts we can meaningfully describe. Later I'll show you an example. So there are some prerequisites where we have specifications. So specifications are basically like a list of instructions on how to decipher the data and rearrange it into things that you can use. So to make it more technical, we can say that we're converting the payload into JSON objects. So here's an example. This is not really how it looks like, but something like that. So the first step is usually we get the string from the QR, and then we rearrange it into a JSON object, the array of JSON objects. So you notice that the middle one, you actually have some atomic properties that the specifications specify. So for example, some things will be ID, the length, and the value. And then we actually refer to the specifications and convert these into name properties, for example, like merchant, StackX. So we know that the merchant name will exist at a specific ID and so on and so forth. So you can see how it's quite straightforward. So the next step will be to validate. Now we have the values. How do we know that it's correct? So the same thing, you need the specs as well. So here there are mainly two tools that we use to validate the contents, Json schemas and just plain old functions. So what are JSON schemas? They are just basically JSON objects that define the structure of JSON data. So this is fed to a validator that will actually validate the JSON objects that we had before. So we actually chose this because we are referring to specifications. It's very straightforward for us to have JSON schemas that is self-documenting and is very clear as well. It helps our developers a lot. They can just read through the code and they know what's going on. So yeah, then in talking about specifications, we actually didn't really want to at the start, but actually we found that there were some cases where JSON schemas cannot cover everything. So some examples are expiry dates. It's a bit complex for it to be done by the JSON schemas, and also the checksum calculation as well. It's not something that JSON schema can cover, or can be very complex. So after you validate the data, we know everything is correct. So there's another step they want to do, which is transformation. So actually, transformation was something that we did after some iterations of the product and testing it out with agencies. So we found that there were some things that help not only developers, but also consumers. So the first thing is, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will know JavaScript is very notorious for this, which is floating points. So basically, we just wanted to convert the transaction amounts into cents. You want to deal with floating points, very common in the payment space. So there are also some truthy and falsy values. So things like people representing 0 and 1, right? So we change zeros into false and 1 into true. And then also there are some implicit defaults. So what I mean is, for example, the specification will say that If this doesn't exist, it is false. But it's not very explicit to everyone, so we just include that. Yeah, so this is the eligibility step is something that's not strictly necessary, but it's something that we do apply. So in this step, we actually want to determine whether the Sgqr is eligible for payment. So let's say you want to redeem your H365, they only want some certain merchants to be included. So this is an extra step. So some conditions that we use are type of transaction, for example, consumer to business, consumer to consumer, and so on. And then the merchant, as well as different payment schemes. So all these are guided by agency strategies and all that kind of stuff, and also their capabilities. So now that you know how we get them, how do we use them? I think the first one is very obvious, right? When you scan and then you can see how much you're paying, who you're paying to. And then next is also we recognize that different agencies or different systems have their own checks that they want to perform. They can also do that. And then I think one other thing that is also you can facilitate some changes. I'm sure some of you have encountered that when you scan a particular QR, let's say on Shopee, right? You cannot change the transaction amount, but there are some shops where you go to, you can change the transaction amount. So Sgqr actually allows for that. And then the final is quite obvious. Final one is quite obvious. Just can make payment. So similarly, here are some lessons learned. So first lesson learned is the specifications can be trusted. But whenever we do tests, we are always verifying our real world data. So actually a lot of team members actually went around like taking photos of different QRs. And then also always consider the customer. It's very easy for us to create a password that's accurate, but if they cannot make payment, it's useless. So the last thing is, I think also quite important, which is log as much as you can, because the Sgqr is always the entry point. So you know how it comes in, then you can continue troubleshooting down the line. So yeah, that's the end of my part, but I think it's been quite interesting. Personally, for me, I can speak for the team as well. From designing all the way to deployment is very interesting. And then we also learn a lot, and we hope that this talk can actually give you all a glimpse into how we implement all this stuff. And then you can actually visit our website, wallet.gov.sg, and take a look. And if any questions, can drop us an email at this, email address. And we're also hiring, by the way. And there are also some team members here. You can help with the Q&A. I'll be passing to Diana to help.
Okay. Thank you, JJ, for re-emphasizing that we are constantly hiring. We do have our talent attraction team with us today. They are sitting right at the sofa there. So just feel free to reach out to them for any questions that you have, about the life of GovTech. Okay. So once again, thank you so much for all the speakers on the insightful sharing. And I believe that many of us here over at Zoom have many questions for our speakers. So let's just dive straight into the Q&A segment now. So maybe let's just start off with questions from the ground. Any questions? Feel free to raise up your hand. Okay, so maybe, just like me, have a lot of curiosity, over this topic on GovWallet. I do have one question for our speaker. So can we top up our GovWallet credits ourselves?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Patricia. You can call me Pat. So I'm product owner of GovWallet. So can we top up credits? We can't top up credits ourselves because at the back end, the wallet, the monies, the financial disbursements actually come from the agency's bank. So if we are topping up, we're like kind of topping up to the agency's bank. So we don't want that. So there is no topping up of that. So agency can give us more financial disbursements if there are. So it's only from the agency side to disperse to us.
Okay, thank you, Pat. We do have a question that comes in from Zoom. Is Sgqr going to replace the Pay Now QR?
Actually, they are the same. They are actually the same thing. So actually, Pay Now QR was one of the first QRs that came out with this. I'm not really sure the first, but one of them, right? Then they slowly actually rebranded into Sgqr. I'm not sure the specifics behind that, but it's actually pretty much the same thing. Yeah, actually, if you see them, you see the structure of it, right? It's actually the same. And then I believe, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, JJ. Any questions? Now we get things moved, right? Any questions from the ground? Okay, we have a gentleman. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to ask about your theoretical buckets, right? Because I think they're very interesting. So, like, what do your buckets actually translate to in real life? So, like, when you split the 100,000 into 10 buckets, is it like 10 threads of processing? And like, does that mean that when you have like 10 times the amount of users, do you really just change your code to 10 times the amount of buckets and the performance will be the same?
Okay, actually, the buckets are more like partitions. Okay, I'm not going to introduce another word, but essentially what it does is that we have a specific access pattern to query scheduled disbursements in our database. So all of the disbursements are stored in a single database, just that the way we query it is slightly different. So meaning to say for the 10 buckets, for example, each bucket is, for example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so when we are querying bucket A, we input A, and then you'll get all the results from A. And then we do the same for B, and you get all the results for B. So essentially, we are querying less for each query. So all of them are all in the same database, just that they are in a sense, their key is slightly different. So the way we query is slightly different, but they're not really in separate places, essentially. So for your question about increasing the buckets, we just increase the number of letters, for example. So A until Z. Yeah, then we can query all the way until Z. Yeah, and then we split them evenly during the creation of the scheduled disbursements, which is, for the example, on the 4th of February, we will just put them one by one. And then on the 4th of June, we will process them using the different keys. Yep. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Delson. In fact, our friends over at Zoom is getting very active with their questions. We have one more question that comes in that, thanks for the great sharing. Wondering if there's a way to bypass the QR code and directly call the payment API in a way to use the GovWallet as a payment gateway via systems.
Okay, while everyone is thinking about this question, can I invite Seb to talk about it? So Seb, invitation.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sebastian, tech lead of GovWallet. So I think the question was about whether, what's the question again? Oh, so like more about, okay, wondering if there's a way to bypass the QR and directly call the payment APIs. So if you have the QR code, right, and you are able to decode it, right, you can definitely interact with our APIs, right? So let's say on your backend system, right, you already have the QR codes. You can definitely use that to call our APIs to perform the payment. Yeah. Okay, yes. That's all.
Okay. I want to show some attention to our friends here. So any other questions, from our audience here? Okay. We do have another questions from Zoom as well. So this is why, okay, so this question goes that why not have GovWallet generate a QR dynamically, set details in live SG, and users can scan at the ATM. In this case, it's verified.
Okay, let me try to take the question. So why not have GovWallet generate a QR? So in that essence is the user scanning the ATM, or if is the other way that the ATM has a code and then the user uses GovWallet to scan it. Well, generally is a set of identity. So as long as you can identify who you are, and then you have this identity and the ATM is able to connect with us to call our GovWallet endpoints and APIs, that's doable. So it can be an idea that can be explored. But today, we don't have that. Yeah. Anyone to add on anything? Anyone in the audience?
Yeah. Okay, we have the gentleman there.
because it's actually interacting C2C and C2B, right? Is there any plans to do machine learning models such that allowing merchants to know more about the customers? Yeah. Because I saw modeling in one of the slides, so I was wondering about that one. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. I would say that we're at a very early stage of the product, and definitely machine learning and certain features that we can implement using certain features that we can create using machine learning are definitely something that we can explore later on. But at the moment, it does feel a bit early. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Hi, just curious to understand how you prioritize what user features to or what features to build for users, given that your citizen base is very big and there are many types of users and different types of effort, etc.
Okay, so prioritization, actually we do have a team of like, we have UX designers that's in the team. We work very closely with government agencies. So agency partners will let us know some of the requirements that they have. And we work alongside the front-end apps that we integrated with like LiveSG, Healthy 365 apps, and then the ATMs, OCBC ATMs. So they take the front-end interactions design into consideration, and we work with them as a back-end module to support those user experiences. So that's how we do it. And then based on the requirements, because GovWallet services multiple agencies and work with multiple front-end apps and teams. So we will consolidate all these requests and look at scalability and how it's going to help the product as a whole and to service even more agencies and more individuals. So that's how we prioritize based on the impact and user experience that different ones comes and share with us. Actually, it's a really difficult job to prioritize many things and requirements. So, but we do it together as a team. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure.
Could you speak a little bit about the privacy model that you have? It looks to me that belonging to certain types of payout buckets, you can tell a little bit about what people's background is, what their individual circumstances might be, and so on. So it's somewhat privacy sensitive.
Okay, so I'll share first and I'll have the team to add on the developers. So generally, all the information that's at our end is identity sensitive because they used certain hashed values. So we don't see the data in clear for some of the agency schemes that we work with. So that way we don't get to know who the people are, what are their demographics and stuff. We do see spending details though, but other than that, not individual identity.
So to add on to Pat, right, in terms of implementation wise, it differs across government schemes. So for agencies that are not keen to let us know who are the beneficiaries, right, all the values we receive are actually hash values and there's no way for us to trace back. So we do try to make sure that we keep it private. Yeah. So what the merchants will see is this is the payout from GovWallet. They have no idea which citizen it came from.
Okay, let me channel my attention to the Zoom because it's really very active as well. I think this question is actually for Dawson. Yes, so for race conditions in buckets, why not do a reconciliation via a generated hash flake prior to partitioning them instead of doing a retry?
Okay, so a couple of reasons. But I think the main one is that I mentioned earlier that we did think about pre-processing at the start. So the example, 4 February, we'll perform this kind of validation. However, for any race condition or concurrency issues, actually is a very, very rare occurrence, mainly because this has already been communicated to the agencies that when we perform disbursement, it should be for unique NRICs, unique people for each. And that only happens if we are talking about non-unique users. So because of that, I think for us as a team, we do have to prioritize the features that are coming in. And as such, this might not be of top priority, mainly because it's such a rare occurrence. And for us to spend a lot more resources trying to build something that might not even occur. Yeah, but we did, this is one of the ideas that did come across to us, to how we can pre-process and clean it up and make sure that there are 0 errors. But for us, the retry is almost immediate, and the effect itself should be pretty minimal. Yeah, so that's the trade-off that we had. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Delson. Any questions from the audience?
Is there any applications or open source projects that the team took to consideration to solve certain of the challenges that was shared earlier as inspiration for the eventual solution?
So you're asking about open source libraries that we used, is it? I think a lot of it, we were looking at how, I think some of the parser stuff, right? So some of the Sgqr parser stuff, we were looking at how other libraries handled it. Other than that, in terms of like payment side of things, we have some concepts that we use from libraries out there, or rather other companies. So for example, Stripe, right, which is a big company in the payment space. So we make use of some of their ideas. So for example, like idempotency, right? So that's a concept that we make use of in GovWallet as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and the next question that comes in from Zoom, for the voucher disbursement using GovWallet, is there a way to limit which merchant that the recipient can use?
Yes. Yeah, so actually, agencies can actually determine like what kind of merchants they want to engage with. So for example, Health 365, they actually had their own agency go out and then collect different QRs, and then they actually load it into a database, right? So this database basically, what it contains is basically the name of the merchant and then the UEN. And then, so for example, let's say you're using H365 credits, right? Then you go scan. And then it's not like, for example, it's some crispy chicken, then obviously they don't want to eat so unhealthy, right? So on Live SG side, they obviously tell you that it's not eligible. So, and then when you go, for example, to like eat salad or something, you pay, then it's like, okay, good. Yeah. So there is a way for us to do it. And then I also understand that a lot of you are very cautious about this, but you also need to understand that agencies have different strategies they want to employ. So they have different things they want to target, and I'm pretty sure we are all taken care of in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, any questions? Okay, gentleman there, yeah.
Can you explain a bit on the choice of using serverless and like DynamoDB especially since like you guys have quite a few consolidation of data that comes from multiple sources, right?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think first thing about the consolidation of data, we don't really have a lot of consolidation across like agencies coming in to give us data. So then the second thing about why serverless, right? I think when we started out as quite a small team, right? We wanted to move very quickly, right? So that would mean trying to figure out, trying to let managed services handle the scalability, right? So we rely on Lambda, DynamoDB, so that we can do that and we can configure it in such a way that it can scale up automatically for us. Yeah. So that was one of the main things. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on. One more questions from the Zoom. What is the key differences in voucher versus credit disbursement? Are there plans to consolidate it to a single approach so that it's clear and straightforward to the citizens?
Actually, there isn't like a really big difference. If you talk about voucher versus credits, vouchers, people would think about X% of a total value or a denomination, a fixed denomination voucher. And then credit disbursements, you're free to key in the amount that you want to disburse. So are there plans to consolidate it? If there are demand, then definitely so. I mean, obviously, if we can do credits disbursements, vouchers is similar. So there is no restriction to that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Stephen.
I'd like to add to that. Yeah, actually, Pat is spot on. I think the difference is more of a mental model, right? It's like people ask, why do some of folks use notes and coins, right? But then people in the tech world, they know that money is basically information. There's nothing physical about it. There's nothing physical about it. It's just information. And then vouchers, like physical vouchers, is basically a closer representation of notes and coins, right? And then digital voucher is somehow like that. Then the question is, in terms of mental model, how ready are we to understand that money is actually just, or it's just information? You do not need a fixed denomination. Yeah. So that's basically the biggest difference. But implementation-wise, it's exactly the same. Over.
Okay, in view of time, we're going to take the last questions. Okay.
I'm aware this might sound a little bit stupid, but why is GovWallet like distributed among so many different apps instead of like being it's a single thing? Like why is it spelled between LifeSG, Healthy365? You know, like why are there like 4 different things I have to look at to access what is basically the same amount of money?
Okay, first and foremost, no question is stupid questions. Thank you for your question.
Thanks for that answer first, and then see anyone wants to chime in. Basically, yes, but you know, when we have so many apps and then you ask someone to download another app, I think people will be asking, why ask me to download another app? So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is take Healthy365 app, for example. They have a very standard user base and people that exercises and all this stuff, right? Exchange rewards with credits. So it may be more suitable for them to use their original intended app for more other services, lifestyle choices and stuff, and then to add GovWallet backend module onto it. So that's the reason why we went that way with like app agnostic. So any other government apps that's available today already available and accessed by multiple people, you can actually leverage GovWallet as a backend module to do these disbursements without the need to get your users to come on board another new app. So that was the reason.
Okay. We have quite a fair bit of questions, in fact, not covered here, but, keep the questions, coming in through our StackX Telegram. We are happy to actually take it up, with all the folks here. Just before we move on, may I just kindly request for a group photo, just to mark our second StackX hybrid meetup lah. Okay. Okay, so just before we wrap up tonight's session, we would like to also present some token of appreciation to our speakers on this very special StackX volunteer tonight. So thank you, Ima, Delson, and JJ. Okay, so we have actually come to the end of the StackX meetup today. Very big thanks to all our speakers and all of you being so interactive. We will really love to hear from you. So please leave us, your feedback and tell us how we can actually further improve, the experience for on-site and virtually. And of course, for those who are here physically with us today, do head over to the reception tables at the back of this space once you are done with the post-event survey to redeem your swag. Oh, you guys have your swag packs ready. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So do feel free to invite your friends and colleagues for our future meetup. Just before we end today's session, yeah. So this is just really a heads up, right? We are going to hold our very first StackX conference in July, Data Science Conference. This is going to be a virtual event that's going to happen from 7 to 8 of July. Registration is already open. Very much once again, everyone, for your attendance tonight.